Good day, guys. Here are the 1.5 notes for informal geometry. I'm just going to go and jump right in. So 1.5, we are going to look first at congruent segments. Okay, and what congruent segments are? Let's start with an example. So we'll do a construction later, but for now I'm just going to draw a line that's an inch long and draw another line that is an inch long. And we'll label them A and B and C and D, and I'm going to mark right here, and what that mark means is they are the same length, and that's what congruent means. And we have a little symbol for congruent, which is a squiggly line over two equal signs. Okay. So here we could say that AB is equal to CD, or segment AB, because that would be the length. Segment AB is congruent to segment CD. Okay. So congruency is equal in. Okay, and there's the. Okay. So there we go. That is our first definition. I'm going to try and keep this under 15. So let's move ahead to our next card, which is midpoint. And for midpoint, let's draw an example. And this time I'm going to use centimeters. I could use inches just to keep you on your toes, and I'll draw one that is 8 centimeters long, an even number just to keep it simple. And if it's 8, that means 4 would be right in the middle. So let's go ahead and label A, B, and in the middle we will put M, because guess what? M is the midpoint, because segment AM is the same as, or is congruent to, segment MB. Ooh, put it. I said AM, but I wrote AB, so let's tweak that. That's why they made erasers. AM is congruent to MB. Okay, M is the midpoint because, so midpoint is the point that divides the segment into two congruent segments, and I'm going to use the symbol two congruent segments. or 2 equal. Alright. So that is our second definition. Last definition, and then we will do a construction. Bisector. Bisector. Okay. So let's draw an example here. I'm going to make it a little bit complicated so we can hit a number of things. So I'm going to start with a segment. And I'm going to cut that segment in half. And I'm just going to approximate it because as long as we establish things in geometry, we can mark them later, and that means that they're equal, even if they're not in actuality. So call this point N right here. I'm going to put these little marks, and I'm going to call this M. And remember, these little marks mean that AM is congruent to MB. Even though it might not be, I said it was so, thus it is so. That's part of the logic of geometry. Okay? So, let's draw a line through here too. Let's draw a line right here. Call that R. So I'm going to pause it here, give you a minute to match up your drawing with the drawing on the note card. Okay, so bisectors. Bisectors here. And we should think of as bi as 2. So what's going to cut this into? Segment AB. So the bisectors would be, first one is NM, which is a segment. This line also cuts it in two because it goes right through the midpoint, because M we said was the midpoint. So we've got MR, which is, we could call that a ray. And we could also say that we have a line that goes through, and let's call that line RM, just to give you a little bit of a different look. Okay? So those are all bisectors of segment AB. Okay? So in general, a bisector is a segment, line, or ray that passes through the midpoint of a segment. Alright, so that is bisector. Alright, hope those definitions make sense, and we will we'll push on to a construction. Alright, so to make a congruent segment, we're going to do congruent segment construction.
THS, sorry for the interruption. Jack Seabaum, can you report to the office? Jack Seabaum, report to the office. Thank you.
Okay, construct a congruent segment. So I'm going to walk through it, And then I'm going to actually have you guys take some ownership and develop some steps so you can remember. So first thing I'm going to do here is just draw a segment. Okay, and any length is fine. Probably help first time through to make it a little bit shorter. So I'm going to go ahead and label that AB. Okay, so we have our segment, and we want to get a segment congruent to that. So I am going to draw a new segment, and I need to make my new segment, and I'll put it at an angle just so you know that it doesn't have to line up exactly under it. It could be a little bit different. And I'm going to make my new segment longer than the original. So I'm going to call this C, and then I don't want to label this point because I'm a neat freak, so I'm going to do what's called a ghost D, a little slight fake D right there that I can get rid of later. Okay, so now I have my original segment, I've got my longer new segment, and then I'm going to get out my compass, and I'm going to use my compass to measure the length of the original segment. Okay, so I have it measured. Now, as long as I don't change how far open it is, I can just take it right here and mark what I've got on my new line, new segment. Okay, so now that I have that, there I go. That should be point D proper. Okay, and then I'm gonna get rid of all this other stuff. Alright, and just because I'm like that, I'm gonna measure in millimeters, and it looks like I've got about 34. And I'll measure this guy, and it looks pretty good. I'm about 34 millimeters there. So yeah, pretty congruent, pretty much the same. Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys a minute, and I want you to make a list of steps. Okay, so go ahead and make a list of steps on your own, and then I will later probably have you talk about it in groups, and then we'll compare and contrast to what I have, or we might even go live. So go ahead and just list the steps to construct a congruent segment. Okay, so here's what I came up with, and you use whatever works for you. Remember, don't ever let me get in the way of you making a play. So my list of steps: draw the original, then draw that longer second. Okay, measure original with the compass, transfer measure to second longer, and I put in uppercase, don't change the opening. If you mess with the measurement, you're going to get a bad measurement. All right, garbage in, garbage out. That's a programming term. Transfer measure to second, did that, finish, mark it, clean it, erase it, and then measure for accuracy. Okay, so those are my 5 steps. Hopefully yours, correlate with that, have a relationship with that. That works. So those are the notes for today. Thank you for your attention.